it's a rare moment when probably one of the most experienced Huey pilots in history, Medal of Honor recipient General Brady, is going to tell us about this aircraft that has meant so much to so many people that the very sound of its rotors are iconic. And we're just going to walk around and have General Brady tell us what this machine did and how they did it with he and his crew. So if you can start.
Okay. I think what was so important about this aircraft is I learned to fly in an H-23. We called it Hiller the Killer. If you could hover that thing, it was over. Hovering and just getting that bird to hover was the most difficult thing about flying it. Had a motorcycle grip. Every time to keep the RPM in the green, every time you moved any part of your body, you had to move all the rest of your body. Both legs, both arms, and a wrist. Now that was a trick to fly. I came within probably 5 minutes of busting out of flight school. I think 40% of the people who went there busted out in those days. Later on there was a demand, so they needed it. And so to fly something like that in combat, like they did in Korea, by the way, where they had the patient on pods, same difficult system of flying, the motorcycle grip, and by the way, it's the opposite of a motorcycle. So every time I got on a motorcycle after that, I'd fall off because I turned the son of a gun the wrong way at the wrong time. But in Korea, you got pods here where they put the patients. Now, I took an orientation ride when I was going to flight school in an H-13 in the pod. Couldn't touch the patient en route, couldn't do anything for him, very restricted at night and weather. And when the patient sometimes would wake up in that pod, he thought he was in a friggin' coffin. So it was not good for the mental health of the patient. He couldn't get out, he's strapped out on the skids. Now, we go to Vietnam. After I get out of flight school, I had about a few hours at Rucker in this bird. When I got to Vietnam, I couldn't even start it. But the beautiful thing about this, we got turbine engines, and when you pull up on the collective, there's none of this shit. You pull it up, it synchronizes, it keeps the RPM constant, and it's powerful. And the Huey would do anything we asked it to do. It was like going from a Model A to a Rolls Royce. When we came out of the old motorcycle grip helicopters, the H-19, the H-34, the H-23, H-13, and we went into this thing, it was just like heaven. So I got checked out in combat missions. I couldn't start it when I got to Vietnam, but I could fly it. In fact, just about anybody that had flown any helicopter could fly this. It was so forgiving. The most important part of it as far as patient care goes is you could treat the patient en route. In other words, we had on here a medic who was trained in every kind of traumatic, double amputations, sucking chest wounds, belly wounds, you name it. He did it on a daily basis. Tracheostomies, he did it, and he could do it back here. And the great medics, the good medics, could start an IV in a bird that's going like this. It's vibrating all the time. But they would start it. Most of the time, we had the guy in the hospital from within like 30 minutes of the time he was shot, he was in an operating room. And that's why the survival rate was so great. Very seldom used litters in combat. A couple key things. First of all, they take up room. I don't care what you are, unless you're a back or neck patient, you don't need a litter. You could be no legs, no arms, whatever. They got them in there, the medic got on them, stop the wound, stop the bleeding, protect the wound, and treat for shock. Boom. Get him in the hospital. The physicians are going to save his life if he's alive when we put him in the tent with the surgeons. We had to learn so much the hard way. There was no book on flying helicopters in combat. It was done in Korea, but on a very limited basis. In fact, my unit, my second tour in Vietnam, carried more patients with 3 of these than were carried by all the helicopters in Korea during the whole Korean War. Over 21,000 patients with 3 of these birds. So flying it, understanding how to get into areas under certain circumstances, enemy situation, weather, the terrain, all those things you had to crank together in your mind and then figure out. And if you did it right, a highway would spring right out of the sky and take you right into the area. In the early days, we had no radio communication because almost all of our patients were Vietnamese. So we tried different techniques. We'd make a low pass to see if we saw any sea rations or something, but you couldn't talk to them on the phone. And so you learned different things to say, different things to look for, because so often we would land right in the middle of the VC. And before you know it, the damn aircraft's full of holes and people shot. So I could say to this day, Cha Dia Chi Kua Ong, which in Vietnamese says, pop smoke. Now that was the first thing. The second thing was the guy on the ground would roll out a smoke bomb for you, and he'd say, okay, dust off. If he could talk to you, if it was an American advisor there, green smoke. Look for green smoke. Well, you'd look down there, and there was 4 or 5 green smokes. And so we knew that the other guy was listening to us on the radio. And so what do we do now? So we said, all right, here's the deal, guys. You pop smoke, I will identify it. So the guy on the ground or whoever says, the smoke is out, dust off. And we say, Roger, I got green smoke. Roger, come on in, that's us. And then even the color of the smoke was important, because green smoke in a ripe rice paddy is hard to see. Red smoke at night is hard to see. Yellow smoke was the best, purple smoke was good. So you had to make sure that you used those things as well, because the terrain was always so thick and so difficult, and the confined areas were so tight that you wanted to make sure. At night we used flashlights, lighters, anything that would flicker at night so that we could get in. We flew at night without any lights. We shot blackout approaches. You turn on your landing light or your searchlight, and the enemy knows exactly where you are and where the guys are on the ground. I always flew the right seat. And the reason I flew the right seat was because you lead with the right pedal. And when you lead with the right pedal, when you got a load on, what does that do? That reduces the demand on the engine and gives you more lifting power in that bird. And I also, when you had a heavy load, as you know, in a helicopter you got to hit translational in order to fly. If you got a heavy load, I would lead with the right pedal and get translational sideways, because I could get it easier than if I went like this forward. Get translational sideways and then shift into the wind, and then you get off the ground. Because sometimes if you had, you know, very difficult sometimes to control the load when there's a whole bunch of people hurt. They're all fighting to get on. I never had to throw anybody off. I heard cases where they had, and then people on the ground then would shoot at the helicopters. Bad news. So I would always make sure, and these are things that we learned from trial and error. We would lock one door. We would load them through one door. And the people, my medic and crew chief, would then make sure we got the most serious on first, and then the least serious, and then if we had to come back, God forbid, we would call another bird in to get him. And the other thing, oftentimes, a guy goes through flight school, his IP flew the left seat. So he looked up to his IP, and he wanted to fly the left seat. And so they all liked the left seat because it made them feel like they were a big shot pilot or something. The problem with the left seat was the landing light and the searchlight are controlled from the right seat. And so are all the good instruments are on the right seat. We had so many guys go in at night saying, shine it over here. Crazy shit, so they could be in the left seat. So I insisted always with my pilots, you will fly the right seat where you control the searchlight and the spotlight, so that when you're going in, you are controlling, because the searchlight will shine wherever you want it to. If you're in the left seat, you got to tell the guy, shine it over here, and that was the last words of several crews. Shine it over here, boom, they're all dead. So, but this bird was We started out with the B model, which was, I don't know how many inches shorter than this. It probably came up to, you probably had about this much room in the B model. But the beautiful thing about the B model was that it was flat at night. The worst thing about the Black Hawk is it sits like this. Your visibility is horrible, just horrible. I don't know how those guys, of course they've never had to fly in real terrain at night with that bird. It's always desert or something like that. But the B model was beautiful. And then they stretched it, put about an L9 engine in the D model Huey, underpowered.
So General, you flew 2,000 missions in this, or?
I flew between 2,500 and 3,000 missions.
2,500 and 3,000. And on what percentage of those missions, when you got in that, did you know what you were getting into? Is every one?
Never,
You
never,
knew?
never.
So that means you must have had tremendous confidence in this helicopter.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, we could have never done what we did in Vietnam. With this helicopter, we rescued almost 1 million people, men, women, children, enemy friendly, scout dogs, everything. You couldn't go out in like an H-19 or an H-34 where you're not sure if you're going to have enough, if you don't know if you got enough lift to get you out of the area. With this thing, I always knew that I could get out of the area, and not only that, I knew I could come in very, very fast, which made it difficult for them to hit you, and I could stop without flaring it, which is dangerous, and I could get out fast.
You aren't going to pick up wounded because there's nothing going on. You're almost constantly landing in a bad situation. You get it on the ground, and now somebody's got to get those wounded on board. Tell me a little bit about your relationship to your crew chief and the medics and the guys that worked for you.
Okay, you got a mission that came in that gave you the location, the call sign, the radio frequency, the number of patients, what was going on in the area. It was never accurate. The guy on the ground couldn't see everything, but he had one thing on his mind, and that, get my wounded buddies out of here. So he would not say anything to make you think I can't get in there. He's not going to say we're under fire, the area is insecure. No, he's going to lie to you about it, and so would I. So we developed a system, and our unit was kind of unique. We went anytime, day or night, for any kind of patients. So if we got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning and the guy's got ringworms, we're going to go get him. I don't care whether it's considered dangerous or not dangerous, we're going to go get him. And what we developed by doing that is they didn't lie to us. They would say, dust off, the area is insecure. Now you got to have a standard. You can't just go get yourself killed. So our standard was this. We will come in if you will stand up and help load the patients. That's all we ask. My crew members got out, their targets. Both of them got out to start loading the patients, and we asked the guy on the ground, you do just this, you stand up and help my guys load. You'd be surprised how many areas we went into they wouldn't stand up. And so my guys had to go out and find the patients, drag them to the aircraft, put them on, and the rest of them are laying in the dirt, won't help us. So that was our standard. Don't talk to me about security. It has no meaning. Security to you is like 50 yards. For me, it's a quarter of a mile. So I don't want to hear security. You just tell me where the enemy is, what kind of weapons he's got, and will you stand up and help load, and we're coming in. Just that easy. And that settled all the overclassification, all the lying, all the bullshit that goes on on radios when communications in a tight situation is difficult.
The sound of that rotor is just synonymous with the Vietnam conflict. Is there anything in particular about this rotor or this configuration that people might not generally know about the Huey, or anything you want to particularly point out about that?
I'm not an engineer, but the one thing that interested me most was the Jesus nut. The Jesus nut is the nut on top. And so before you went on a flight, of course you pre-flighted the aircraft, but that's the thing you looked at, and we called it the Jesus nut, because if that ever came off, that's the end of it. So I always would check the Jesus nut. No, it's a turbo, constant RPM, tremendous lift capacity, tremendous quickness, and very, very reliable. We had most of our aircraft that went down were down because they were shot up. You have to go through periodic maintenance, of course, like with any piece of machinery. But we had an aircraft shot up every 4 or 5 days. Every time you take some rounds, they got to go through it and check it, and you'd have to get another aircraft. But this was, and by the way, if they'd have just taken the Huey, put another engine on it, give us a radar altimeter and some upgraded avionics, you'd have never needed the Black Hawk. You'd have never needed it. And this thing would have been good for the world forever. Now, if you're going to use the Black Hawk for troop carrying, it's a little more survivable. It'll take more G's than this one will in a crash. Certainly, it's a good machine, but not for what we did. This was just fine.
Now I know, we love to, for obvious reasons, romanticize the Mustang and the P-40s and those great airplanes. But there's some things about the number of combat missions and what this aircraft did that are not generally understood. And I know that's a little bit of a hot button with you.
That's a hot button with me, you bet. This is the most combat experienced aircraft in the history of aviation. And you don't see it in a lot of museums. Museum of Flight in Seattle didn't have one. A good friend of mine there, guy of some influence, Bruce McCaw, said we need a Huey in there. So they put a Huey in there with all those fixed wing things all over the place, never done nothing, never been nowhere. And this bird's been everywhere, done everything. I think it had like over 7 million hours of combat time. 7 million hours, 16 million sorties or something. Incredible number. Of course, we lost a lot in Vietnam. People in my business, 1 out of 3 were a casualty to what they did. Crew members, pilots. I think we killed, I don't know, 200 and some pilots. I think we lost over 200 dust-off aircraft in Vietnam. So it was risky, and but very, very effective. There was not a battlefield operating system in combat in Vietnam more effective than this bird. Not artillery, not infantry, nothing did its job better than this bird as far as saving lives go.
General, on the day that you saved, was it 51 or 52?
There was
rescued.
Yeah, they said 51, but we probably got 70 or 80 out that day.
I've read the description in your book. I've heard you talk about it. I'm still not sure, having never flown a helicopter, if I understand it. I wonder if you could just have people understand the trick of flying up the side.
All right, here were the challenges my second tour. First tour, we're in the Delta, flat terrain. I mean, it's one great big forced landing area, not a problem. Second tour, we're in the mountains, and you got the afternoon clouds and you got the low valley fog in the morning. That was killing our people. So I have all young pilots, and I know they're going to push themselves, and the dust-off crews were getting killed regularly by this time, 1967. So I have no idea how we're going to get them out in weather in daytime or at night, which is even worse. So I found a couple techniques, and one of them was, as I told the story earlier today, soldier was bit by a snake and he was on a mountaintop. We got there in August, September. This was in November. We hadn't had anybody killed yet. We'd had a lot of our aircraft shot up and people wounded, but nobody killed. And so I went up the mountain straight into the stuff. You got the mountain here and you got the valley here. The clouds come down the mountain to about right here. So you go IFR, you don't know if you're upside down, right side up, but I could fall out in the valley and I would break out, and I knew that was okay. So after doing it, I went up 4th or 5th time, and they're screaming that he's going into convulsions and come please, dust off, please. So I went up and I was blown sideways. That was a breath of God, and I had this window down always, and as I said, I always led with the right pedal. And I looked out the window and I could see that far in that stuff. I could see the tip of that rotor blade. That's as far as I could see. But I could also see I thought we were going in the trees. I was looking for a hole in the trees because I was sure we were going to crash. But I could see the tip of the rotor blade as I looked out the window, and I could see the top of the trees. Guess what? I got 2 reference points. I know I'm right side up. So I turned it sideways and I went up the mountain sidewards. And that's the same technique I used for the day that I got the Medal of Honor. I did that 4 times with low valley fog. Not top, but the low valley fog, which is like a snowbank. But you dip into it, rotor blade, trees, terrain, and you work your way through it sideways. Piece of cake. Nobody can see you. And so you're perfectly safe. Night was a trick. I was sitting out in an area we call, that they call over there Death Valley, and I'm watching a firefight at night. And if you ever seen a firefight at night, it's just a beautiful thing. You know, you got the tracers, the different colored tracers, and you got the flares coming down through the clouds, and the mountains. It was during some weather. The mountains are covered with fog or clouds, and I looked up at a mountain with the flare, and I could see the mountain. There was the silhouette of the mountain, and it just kind of stuck in my head. So a short time later, we get a call to pick up some 101st guys in the valley during a tropical storm. Now on the Delta, we would fly with this, and the crew members would lay with their head out the window. They'd lay on the floor with their head out the door, and they would watch behind for a light on both sides, and we would watch for a light in front. So it's like ink, and it's a tropical storm. So I see a light, I would fly towards that light, and these guys would say, okay, I can still see lights behind us, because we didn't want to go IFR. There was no letdown facilities, and we could have got up above it, and it would not have been too much of a problem. But you're not going to get the patient that way. So then I had a vision of that mountaintop in the clouds, in the silhouette of that mountain with those flares. I knew exactly how I was going to get those guys out. I went back. We had a float ship. I went back and got a ship with good instruments on it. I knew the mountains were about 4,000 or 5,000 feet high, I think. So I gave myself 1,000 feet clearance from the mountains, and I got another pilot. I used 3 pilots that night and a couple crews, and I told the radar people at Chulai, vector me to these coordinates. So I went up to 1,000 feet above the mountains, and they gave me a vector. Now once I get over the area out there, there's an Air Force ship at about 9,000 feet dropping flares. The idea was to catch a flare out the window and follow it down through the mountains. But they got to keep a flare in the sky at all times, because you get at 1,500 feet in 5,000 feet mountains, you're in trouble. You can't go either way, you got to go straight up. And that happened a couple times. And finally, they got the picture. We came down under it. We made 4 trips in that night and got them all out. And now that they found out later, there was a lot of publicity associated with it, because apparently it hadn't been done before, and so for that mission I got the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the 2nd highest award. So that was actually more spectacular in terms of the system and the technique used than the day I got the Medal of Honor.
3,000 missions, and there's never any time to hesitate. When it's time, you had to climb. You know, when it's time to go, it's time to go. I heard you say a breath of God. I heard you say you had a vision of a mountaintop.
Epiphany.
Okay. Do you want to talk about? Does your faith play into this?
Yeah, it was for me. It was everything, because you know they say you all always talk about guys that the tremendous fear they have here and there, and I've seen that fear, and it's a horrifying thing. It will kill you. Fear will cause to happen the thing that caused it, if you can sort that out. And I never experienced fear. For me, it was, I didn't care if I got killed. I was doing the right thing. I was saving American lives, the greatest citizens we have in this country, soldiers. If I got killed doing that, that's God's will. Forget about it. What I was focused on was, what kind of weapons does he have? How close is he to you? And then from that information, I looked at the terrain, And, for example, here's a rice paddy. The enemy's in this tree line. The friendlies are in this tree line. There's a riverbed right here. So you don't go in like that. You're going to get killed. You go down in the riverbed. You stay down in the riverbed behind the trees. You hop up over the trees. You turn your tail into the fire always. You do not want the bullets coming through the windshield. You want them going through the transmission. You set down, you load up over the trees and back out. That's a tactical approach, and it works. If the terrain suits it, and if everything else suits it, that's how we flew. So I was busy analyzing the terrain, trying to figure out what's the best way in there, mixing it in my mind, and then I would have a vision of the approach. There would be a highway just come out of the sky and just take me down through that riverbed, up over those trees, turn around, and go out the same way. In the meantime, you got to coordinate with the guy on the ground. You're going to stand up, right? You got all the patients in one location, right? We're not going to hover around down there looking for patients. You bet, dust off. We got them all waiting for you. You just come into the smoke and we'll load them and you're on your way. And so that, you were so busy focusing, there was no time for fear or anything like that.
If we could go back just a little bit and talk anything you would care to share about the tail assembly.
Well, we had, when you're making a picked up in a confined area in triple canopy jungle, there were times when you would make the pickup where you couldn't see the sky. In other words, you come down through one layer, you move over, you come down through another layer, you move over till you get down to the ground. You couldn't land most of the time. They'd have to load the patients up like that. And you had somebody always with their eyes on that tail rotor. You lose a tail rotor, you spin in, that's the end of it. And I would watch the pilot and the co-pilot, we watched the trees in relation to the main rotor. The crew was watching the tail rotor. So you had to be very, very careful. And they were my eyes. They would say, okay, dust off, or double nickel, come down, okay, back up, go to your right, come on down, and they would work me into the area. I couldn't have done it without them. So,
would you have had the unwavering will to do what you did if you had not worked for Kelly?
You know what? That's a good question. If it hadn't been for Kelly, we wouldn't have had a job. Somebody else would have had those birds, and those of us who were medically trained, we wouldn't have had a job. We'd be flying for gunships or slick ships or something like that. But I do think that I had great empathy for the guy on the ground, because I worked with the infantry for 3 years before I went to flight school. I was in Berlin when they built the wall, so I saw that crisis, and I saw what these people went through. The infantry guys in the ground, on the mud, in those horrible conditions, and I'm going home sleeping in a bed. Come on, give me a break. So I had great empathy for that guy, and I believe that wherever I was, not only me, but most of the dust-off pilots, we're going to do what Kelly taught us to do, and if there was no Kelly, there would be no us, in a sense. And so, but he was the inspiration. He was the absolute inspiration. He saved my career and in other ways, and so this guy was, he was unique.
Do you mind repeating the story of the individual that suggested to you that because of what happened to Kelly, it's time to curb your enthusiasm?
Yeah. Well, the day, the prelude to the story was that Kelly promised me I could come and take his place in the Delta. We had 2 birds down there. Because the fight was going on in Saigon with Stilwell and keeping our Red Crosses. So he said, Brady, come down and march. Oh, come on. There was so much flying going on that he didn't want to leave. He was having a ball. So many patients. And so finally one day he said to me, he said, Brady, you can come to the Delta on 1 July. Well, 1 July, I hadn't heard anything until he got killed. He was killed on 1 July. So I went down there, I spent that night in his bed, wrote up the missions from his desk, and the next day the battalion commander, the aviation battalion commander for the whole Delta called me, and I think his name was Robinson. And he says, okay, Brady, he says, it finally happened. We knew the way you guys were flying. We were the only people flying at night, the only people going on the battlefield. He said, I knew somebody's going to get killed, but I didn't think it'd be Kelly. I thought it'd be one of the young pilots. And he said, so you guys need to change the way you do business. And I said, we ain't changing nothing. We're going to fly just the way Kelly taught us to fly. He didn't own me, see? Somebody in Saigon owned me, so he couldn't tell me how to fly, although he owned all the aviation resources in the valley. So I said, we're going to do exactly what Kelly taught us. We ain't going to change a thing. So when I was leaving the office, he said, oh, I got something for you. And he gave me the bullet that killed Kelly. It had gone right through his heart, right through here. He didn't wear a flak vest. And I did, and the rest of us did. It didn't stop much, but it might, might just slow up the .30 caliber. So it went through him and lodged in the door. It was the only bullet that hit the aircraft. And so it made people think that maybe there was a sniper there waiting for Kelly because he was spreading so much goodwill in the Delta. As I said, villages came out to watch him carry away their wounded Vietnamese children and women and everything, and they loved him. And so in the BC, anytime they found someone like that, they wanted to kill him. And it may be that that's what they did that time. We don't know. But anyhow, he gave me, I still got it. I still have the bullet. I went to the family with it, and they said, let's think about it. And but I still have it.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to Warbird in Review on, it's Friday now. Thank you so much for being here. We have a great program, as you can tell, and Connie is, she's just moving a chair. Okay, that's fine. I looked at the program that we've got today, and I had great difficulty in how I was going to orchestrate it. I'm Ed McElhenney. Yeah, I'm a retired fighter pilot, and I got helicopters behind me, so it's going to be difficult for me, but please bear with me today. But we are in the midst here of a hero, and I don't know how many of you know General Brady's story, I guess is the best way to put it, but I feel obligated to let everybody know exactly what went on so many years ago. I, as a retired general officer also, I presented many medals and awards myself, and typically they started with attention to order. So bear with me for a minute, and I will say attention to order. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Major Brady distinguished himself while serving in the Republic of Vietnam, commanding a UH-1H ambulance helicopter. He volunteered to rescue wounded men from a site in enemy-held territory, which was supported to be heavily defended and to be blanketed by fog. To reach the site, he descended through heavy fog and smoke and hovered slowly along the valley trail, turning his ship sideward to blow the fog away with a backwash from his rotor blades. Despite the unchallenged close-range enemy fire, he found the dangerously small site where he successfully landed and evacuated 2 badly wounded South Vietnamese soldiers. He was then called to another area completely covered by dense fog, where American casualties lay only 50 meters from the enemy. 2 aircraft had been previously shot down, and others had made unsuccessful attempts to reach this site earlier in the day. With unmatched skill and extraordinary courage, Major Brady made 4 flights to this embattled landing zone and successfully rescued all the wounded. On his 3rd mission of the day, Major Brady once again landed at a site surrounded by the enemy. The friendly ground force, pinned down by enemy fire, had been unable to reach and secure the landing zone. Although his aircraft had been badly damaged and his controls partially shot away during his initial entry into this area, he returned minutes later and returned the remaining injured. Shortly thereafter, obtaining a replacement aircraft, Major Brady was requested to land in an enemy minefield where a platoon of American soldiers was trapped. A mine detonated near his helicopter, wounding 2 crew members and damaging his ship. In spite of this, he managed to fly 6 severely injured patients to medical aid. Throughout that day, Major Brady utilized 3 helicopters to evacuate a total of 51 seriously wounded men, many of whom would have perished without prompt medical treatment. Major Brady's bravery was in highest traditions of the military service and reflects great credit upon himself and the United States Army. This is the man who is here. Stay down. Stay down. That's fine. That's fine. I had to do that. I'm sorry, but yeah, now you all know that part of the story, and there's much more after that. He made a comment. He said, what was it in the book? You said earning the Medal of Honor you thought was sometimes easier than wearing it. And that's an interesting comment. We'll talk about that later. But as we go on, you can see we got 2 beautiful aircraft here. I'm a fighter pilot, okay? A UH-1H, and we got the Sikorsky over here. We got the owners both here. We've got Dave Schmitz, who's going to be talking a little bit about the UH-1 later, and Mike Schneider, and he's got the Sikorsky. We'll be talking about that later. The sequence of events, I think we're going to talk to General Brady for a little bit here, and then we're going to talk about each of the other airplanes. We'll do a quick walk around, and then we'll open it up to questions. So that's what I propose, and with that, General Brady, I'm going to open it up to you, and just say, I have 1,000 questions. He's got a book, by the way, and there's going to be a signing later in the museum or in the bookstore over there. And I've read the book. Interesting stories. And you flew dust off. Tell us a little bit about the mission.
I know we've got a lot of Vietnam veterans here. From Vietnam, right? Raise your hand, guys. I know there's quite a few here. Any of you ever picked up by dust off? Yeah, here we go. Good. Well, the story. Much of the story is in the book about the origins of dust off and how successful it was and the techniques we used to get into the battlefield. And so I always usually start with a war story. It kind of tells you what we did. You all know the difference between a war story and a fairy tale. A fairy tale begins with once upon a time, and a war story begins with this is no shit. So we were called out one day to kind of give you an idea to a pickup site in a combat area. The people on the ground were wounded Marines. And as is always the case with the Marines, there's a lot of confusion down there. Got some Marines here. I don't want you to think I'm saying anything disparaging about another service, but for you Marines, disparaging is bad. So if you've ever been in a deal, we got a dry riverbed here, you got kind of a tree line here, you got an open rice paddy and surrounded by trees here, and the enemy is in this tree line, and the patients are here, and the friendlies are here. And so I'm flying with this young warrant officer and made a nice approach into the area. We dropped down into the riverbed, scooted along behind the trees, jumped up over the trees, turned our tail into the fire. You always did that. You did not want the bullets to come through the windshield. Better that they came through the transmission, so you always did that, and you went out the same way that you came in. Well, if you've ever been in a situation like that where they're crawling around, nobody will stand up, and they're shouting and shooting, and it's just a mess, you know what it's like to pucker. And pucker is when the cheeks from the lower part of your body slowly begin to envelop your ears. And so we're sitting there all puckered up, and you also try to shrink yourself. You just try to become just as small as you can. And you're sitting up here, and everybody's crawling around down here. And so we're shrunk up, we're puckered, and I look over at my co-pilot, and his head's going like this, all over the cockpit. I thought that's strange. Strange guy. Back to the patients. Let's get him on. Let's get the heck out of here. And then back to my buddy, and there his head is like that. And I couldn't help myself. I broke down. I laughed out loud. And he didn't miss a stroke. He said, "Laugh, you son of a bitch, but it's harder to hit a moving target." And that's a true story. By the way, that pilot, if you heard the story about the guy who confiscated a Huey and tried to fly it into the White House, he was the Maryland State Patrol helicopter pilot that got between that helicopter and the White House. We looked for him for years. We thought he was killed in an underground drug thing or something. And I heard his voice on a radio in Maryland. He was getting ready to go have lunch with the President of the United States. So that's how we found the guy. Great pilot, even though he was trying to be a moving target. But the key for us in Dust Off was to find ways to get in during the battlefield. And if you used your imagination, and if you looked at the terrain, and you knew where the friendlies were, and you knew where the enemy was, and you knew what weapons the guy had, and you'd mix and mingle that in, a highway would actually spring out of the sky and show you how to get in that area. And so we did find different ways to get into different areas, and they talk about blowing away the smoke or the fog or whatever. I mean, where does it go? You can't blow it away. And the way we found this technique was one day in Vietnam, as you guys know, in the afternoon, the clouds built up on the outpost in the mountains. In the morning, you had low valley fog, about 500 feet, just like a snowbank. And we got a call. I had just gone back to Vietnam for my second tour, and I had a bunch of young warrant officer aviators right out of flight school. All their names started with an S. They all thought they were handpicked to fly Dust Off. Somebody just grabbed these guys and gave them to me. And they never had any experience at all, but they were eager. They were ready to go, and I was worried about the weather, and I was worried about the mountains, and I know they would not stop, and I was worried about how to do these, especially these weather missions. So we got a call one day for a kid who was on one of the outposts, and he'd been bitten by a snake. And those snakes in Vietnam, you know, it's like lay down so you don't hurt yourself falling, because they were pretty deadly. And so initially we went into the area, and I knew I could fall out because it was VFR under the clouds, but they were in the clouds on the top of the outpost. We start up into the outpost, and of course you get all screwed up, but I fall out in the valley, broke out, back up again, couldn't figure out how in the hell am I going to get in there. I could not see. So the crew's nervous. The guys are shouting at me, "Dust Off, please, please hurry." He's going into convulsions. So I said, "Okay, guys, we got one more time." So we went around and started back up again, and I was totally disoriented, and the gust of wind blew me sidewards, and I always had my window down on the right side. And I was sure we were going in, so I looked out the window hoping to find a hole in the jungle, and guess what? I could see the tip of the rotor blade, and I could see the top of the trees. So I knew I was right side up. And I says, "Damn." So I turned that sucker sidewards. You have to go very, very slowly. The fog doesn't blow away. It's there, but you can see 20 feet to the end of your rotor blade, and if you've got 2 reference points, you can do it. We did it, first time. got the guy to the hospital, and I think he lived. We used that technique from then on to get into low valley fog areas and also patients who are in the top of the mountains. That was one technique. We had a lot of other ones too.
General Brady, well, first of all, I need to warn you, you got a former Marine sitting next to you,
Oh,
so
God.
be very, very careful, okay? So, yeah, I'm surprised he didn't smack you or something like that, but I guess rank has its privileges, right? So, I will say, this day and age, we navigate with GPS and all that kind of stuff. How about your navigation techniques? You read the citation, and you went to a variety of places, and weather was obviously a problem. Did you go out by radial and DME, or were you so familiar with the terrain and other references out there? How did you navigate?
No, we had maps, and I'll tell you, here's how it worked with dust off. After we finally got the resource refined, we were off the ground in 2 minutes in a Huey, and the average time from the time the guy was shot until we had him in operating room was 33 minutes. So if the odds of you getting shot in a jungle in Vietnam and surviving were greater than if you were in an accident in a highway in America because of that helicopter. But there was no nav aids, no nothing. What you did was the co-pilot ran to the aircraft, cranked it. The aircraft commander went to the operations, and we got a heading and we got a distance to the pickup site. The first thing you do when you lift off is you let the guy in the jungle know we're on the way, because they're worried about his wounded friends, his buddies, and they need to know that help is on the way. So you let them know. Now, as you get into the area, that's when you start analyzing the terrain, the enemy location, the friendly location, what signal. In the early days, we had problems with signals, because it was all Vietnamese, and we couldn't talk to them, but we could say smoke, whatever, and they would say green smoke is out, dust off. And guess what? You'd look down there and you'd find 4 or 5 green smokes. And we went into some wrong areas a little bit before we finally wised up. And so then after that, we would say, you got smoke, Raj. Okay, here's the deal. You pop smoke, I will identify the color. And so that we know it's you, and we're coming. A very simple thing, but it saved us a lot of heartaches compared to the first few times when we went into the wrong smoke thing. But essentially, heading, distance, frequency, call sign, that's all we need. Now, if we had trouble finding him, if it was a LERP guy or something you needed a hoist, then oftentimes we would use our FM Homer to get in and find him. The worst missions at this time, more of our people were being killed at night and in weather than were being killed by the enemy. We're losing a lot of crews, a lot of aircraft, because they were flying in the mountains, and they were flying at night, get disoriented, and crash. So those were the things. But we found a way to do the weather in the daytime, and later on we found a way to do the weather at night.
Understand. How about, the mission that you earned the Medal of Honor on? You went back and forth several times. What's a typical crew for your dust-off mission? How many guys?
Crew?
Okay.
We had a pilot, co-pilot, medic, and a crew chief.
Okay. And did any of them ever look at you and go, "You're nuts, I don't want to go with you, and this is too dangerous"? Or are you guys all on the same sheet of music?
Well, we had some cases where they would come back and never fly again. Oh. And so, but did not happen very often. The most important thing, for example, the day of the Medal of Honor, we used the technique to go into the fog to pick up the 2 Vietnamese wounded. I was not on duty that day, but they called me because it was a weather mission, and we knew how to do that. And then when we were lifting out of there, we heard about, actually they say 51. There were 70 patients in a valley in the same kind of circumstances. And so we said, they've been there all night. Why hasn't somebody got them out? And so we went out to LZ West, but they were not going to let me go in. And so the brigade commander then talked to my co-pilot, and he said, we can do it. Just give us a frequency. Just tell us who we're talking to, and we'll go get them. They were actually in the fog right below the base. And so you got to have a willing co-pilot, and you got to have willing crew members. And when you got that, the crew works together, there's no problems. But if you got somebody that's afraid or somebody that's not willing or worried or some way not really dedicated to the mission, that's not good. Everybody on the team has to be together, and we all have to be dedicated to getting that wounded guy out. And you go after him like you'd want somebody to come after you, or the way you'd want somebody to come after your wounded relative or friends. You just give it all you got.
Mm-hmm. Who was the initiator of the dust-off mission? Who started all that?
This was all started by Charles Kelly, and he was a World War II veteran. I write about him in my book. We just came back from Vietnam 3 or 4 weeks ago. Well, actually in early May. And we dedicated a memorial to him there near the spot where he was killed. But he was killed trying to rescue some people in a very trying time when they were trying to use portable Red Crosses. It's a complicated story, but he gave his life to save dust-off, which eventually saved, in Vietnam alone, 1 million lives. And from then on to today, who knows how many lives have stayed in Afghanistan and Iraq, but the call sign is still dust off, and that was Charles Kelly's dust off. His dying words when he landed in an area, hot area, and they said, get out, we're under fire. His dying words, when I have your wounded, he took a round right through the heart and killed him on the spot. But those are the inspiration for dust off pilots, the standard for dust off pilots, and combat medics to this day. So he was probably the most remarkable soldier I ever met.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, how about a typical day as a dust-off pilot? I mean, did you work, 12 hours and just, again, on alert, basically?
It's 24 hours.
Okay.
We, as I said, or maybe that was earlier, we, in a 9.5-month period with 6 assigned UH-1H models, only one time we would have 3 flyable, 3 that were flyable. In a 9.5-month period, we evacuated over 21,000 patients. Now, those same aircraft, there was more than us. All the dust-off units in Vietnam were doing the same thing. So we averaged something like 28 combat missions a day, 4 at night, 16 hours flying time every day. We were on 24 hours at a time. First up ship, second up ship, and the third one was a hoist. And so we rigged a horn to a battery thing, and so when the horn went off, if it was the first aircraft, 1 blast, second aircraft, 2 blasts, and then we ran to the aircraft, and as I said, we were off the ground in 2 minutes. I think the most challenging, but the weather missions in the daytime, but the most challenging missions were night weather missions. And as I said, that was killing it, and I'll tell you quickly how we found out how to solve that problem. I was out, you got low valley or flat terrain here, and then you go into the mountains. And the mountains went up to about, this was in the Chulai area. The mountains went up to 5,000 or 6,000 feet, I think, and valleys and things in between them. And so one day I'm sitting out in the valley on a quiet mission. And, if you've ever been at night like that where the tracers and the flares and everything, it's kind of pretty, really. And so you're sitting there, and I'm looking at the scenery, and then here's a mountain. And the mountain is in the clouds all the way down here. And I look, and a flare come down by that mountain. I could see the silhouette of that mountain. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but it just kind of stuck in my head. So fast forward a couple of weeks or so, we get a call from the 101st, and they're out in an area that was they called Death Valley, and they had a whole bunch of wounded, and it's in the middle of a tropical storm. And so I tried to use a technique that we used in the Delta, which at night in the Delta with all the canals and everything, you could get on a canal and with your searchlight, you could follow it like a highway right into the pickup zone. Very easy navigation, no wires, no mountains, no nothing. It was beautiful, no problem at night. Mountains are a different deal. And so I initially tried to follow a river up into the place, but it was raining so hard that it was coming off the window and it was blinding me. And you would have a crew chief in the front and a crew chief in the back, and you'd watch for a light in front of you and you'd watch for a light behind you in case you got stuck. You could turn around and get out of there. Well, it was like ink. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get up that river. And then I had this friggin' vision of that mountain in the clouds. But I had a D model Huey and it did not have good instruments on it. And so I knew how I was going to do it. I went back, got another airplane with a transponder and another crew, and then I told them I want a vector to the pickup site. I'm going to go to about 6,000 feet IFR to the pickup site. Air Force flare ship was at 9,000 feet, and I says, I want you guys to drop flares, and I'm going to see if I can circle those flares down through the mountains and get in, use my FM Homer to get in and pick up those guys. And so the Air Force guy's not sure what's going on, and the son of a gun stopped the flares when I'm about 1,500 feet in 3,000-foot mountains. But the beautiful thing about the Huey was you just stop it and just straight up. You don't dare go any direction because you'll hit a mountain. So I finally got the guy trained, and so he kept the flare in the sky, lighted all the time. And we came down through that stuff, and we got in there, and we got those wounded out. ITO, up above the mountains, back to the hospital. We circle over the ocean until we saw the lights of Chulai, and then we go into the hospital. So we made 4 trips that night, doing this, using the same technique, and we got every one of them out. And after that, we were never stopped by night weather, nor were we ever stopped by day weather. We never left a patient in the field, period.
Wow. I will say it's really nice these days to have night vision goggles, and that was way before that. All right, you were talking about the Huey. This is the exact model Huey that you flew. Is that correct? A Huey-1H. Okay. Let's shift gears for a second. I'll give you a break, and we're going to let Dave talk a little bit about his aircraft. First of all, Dave, thank you so much to bring it here. It is a beautiful aircraft. And all right, tell us a little bit about the acquisition. Where did it come from?
Well, it came from Olympia, Washington, where we bought it from Northwest Helicopters in 2015. Just happened, my partner came to me I flew T6s for quite a few years, and we were at a safety meeting in Minneapolis, and Barry says, Dave, I want to talk to you after the meeting. Okay, and so the meeting was over. What's up, Barry? He said, well, I want to, my son and I want to buy a Huey. I said, all right, well, how much time you got in helicopters? Well, none, but we're going to flight school. Okay, well, let's just start. And I had just been in the traded plane, and I saw there were a couple for sale, and so then that's where it started.
Okay, but there's more to that. I told you as former Marine, but what did you fly for the Marines?
I flew CH-46. I was in Vietnam 69-70 and HMM 364 at Marble Mountain.
Okay, so he was a Marine CH-46 kind of guy there, so
Yeah.
so he's okay. But okay, so you acquired it. Was there a great deal of restoration required?
Actually, no, it was pretty well restored. It was in Vietnam in 66, 67 and damaged, and we've got kind of a history on it, and it was returned to the States, which is kind of unusual for a Huey, and went to Corpus Christi and was redone, and then flew around the country and guard units, and it was in Savannah, Georgia, when I actually was Army trained. I was in OCS, got out of OCS in June of '68, and Pensacola was backlogged, and the Marines and the Navy got a few slots in the Army, so I went TAD to the Army for 9 months. so,
So he's okay, right? He got his Army training.
So they didn't know what to do with us down in Fort Walters or in Savannah. They just left us alone. We just flew, and turned out good. And my fellow Navy trained, they used to call us Army pukes. And so we'd end up calling them Navy pukes or whatever. Well, when I got to Vietnam, I had 208 hours, I believe, in helicopters and 80 hours in Huey in flight school. And we could fly a helicopter. Coming out of the Navy in Pensacola, they only had 80 hours in 34s or I think they 206s, something like that. So when I started flying with it, hey, you guys can fly. So we didn't get called Army pukes for too awfully long. So it was interesting, but I enjoyed my time in the Army, but I went back in the Marines after I got out of flight school.
Outstanding. Okay, and I'll ask General Brady. This is how much time you got in one of these things?
In the Huey?
Yeah.
I haven't got a lot of time. Probably all of it was in Vietnam. Most of my time in the Huey was in Vietnam, and it's about 1,800 hours
Okay.
in Vietnam. But we flew, I can't tell you what a joy it was to have this thing when we got to Vietnam. Before that, they had the H-13. It took both feet, both legs, and a wrist to fly one of those things. And it does with the 34 too, I think, right? You still got that damn thing? In a 19, I swear to God, we flew single pilot missions in the 19, and it's like this bird, not as big, not as good, but at the end of the day, your left wrist and your left leg were just absolutely worn out, and you had to transfer fuel, and you had to read maps and do all that. But that, I think, made me a better pilot, because when I got in this thing, you just jerk that sucker off the ground, and it would pick up anything you could put on it. And we were talking the other day about how many is the most patients you ever got on that thing. And my co-pilot said one night we picked up a guy named Webster Anderson, who was later on became a Medal of Honor recipient, but he was on a mountaintop in a tropical storm. We used the flares and everything, and my co-pilot, who kept the record after the after-action report, said we had 21 people on there, 21 American soldiers. Wow. And another pilot recently, I heard, said he had 27 on there. Now, if you've got women and children, then you can get them. But we did not use litters unless it was a head or a neck thing. And you stacked them in there because you knew you were going to have them in an operating room in 15 minutes or so, and that was the key to saving their life. Stop the blood. You protect what they got at one, and you make sure they're getting the other, and that's blood and air. And with those two things, 15 minutes, double amputees, sucking, you name it, and we get them in the operating room, and they're going to live. I forget the numbers exactly, but Vietnam set survival records never before to this day paralleled in combat. I think 10% of our people were wounded in Vietnam, and of that 10% who were wounded, less than 1% died. And so if we got our hands on you, you were going to live, unless you were already dead. And so that was just a basic fact, and the troops really appreciated that. But this was it. It was not so much us. We had a machine that we had faith in, that we knew could do anything we asked it to do, and was great in the jungle. It was quick. It had a nice attitude for approach at night. We flew blacked out. We had no lights on at night, and we did not use lights when we landed. So you had to have a signal on the ground, and it could be, one of my pilots landed at one night to a flicking Zippo lighter. And so if you've got a light, and you could take this thing, you could stop it above the trees, and then you could tilt it, and then you keep that light between you and the ground, and you don't need a searchlight. They don't want you to use a searchlight because it exposes their position. and it'll get you down there, and then the crew will tell you when you can set it down. And so couldn't do it, could not have done it without this bird. It was a lifesaver. And by the way, it's the most combat experienced aircraft in history. The Air Force weenies with all their fighter pilots and all that crap. I mean, and this bird has 7 million combat hours or something, more Medal of Honor recipients, except for one World War II aircraft, I think. I had a friend who ran a museum out in Seattle, the Museum of Flight. He's got all these fixed-wing aircraft, and I said, for God's sakes, why don't you put a real airplane in here? Those people don't fly, they ride. You only really fly a helicopter. Everybody knows that. So the guy had a lot of money, but it took him a long time, and finally we got a Huey helicopter in the Museum of Flight in Seattle, and more people visit that than any of the other aircraft there, and that's understandable because it's better than all the rest of them.
Okay, I think the interview is over. I knew that was coming, General. It was just a question of when. That's all. So I accept the hits, and what can I say? But I will go on, shift gears a little bit, and talk to Mike a little bit about his aircraft that's here. And oh, by the way, there's bullet holes. We said bullet holes in the floorboards of the Huey over there that have been patched up. Is that right?
We think so. The skin was repaired, but there's certain unidentifiable holes in the floor.
Okay.
Right.
And that brings me to the Sikorsky over there, because I guess there's a lot of bullet holes in that thing. And Mike, I'll say again, thank you so much for bringing it here. It is a beautiful aircraft, and tell us a little bit about acquisition of that.
First of all, with utmost respect to the General, when I joined the Navy, they told us we were going to take care of the Air Force, the Army, the Marine Corps. So basically, that's what they told us. So we kind of felt like we took care of you guys. So
there you go.
But
okay. Thank you. That's one hit back.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Sikorsky has 54 documented bullet holes, and it has some damage history in Vietnam. It basically was the second time it was damaged. It was sent to Japan. That's how it basically survived. It was up there when the HMM 362 squadron in 1968, they were told to go home, and they gave all the rest of the helicopters to the South Vietnamese. And this one was up in Japan, was sent to the States, flew in a guard unit a couple of years, and then sent to Davis-Monthan.
Mm-hmm. And you got a crew chief out here that's got some real background with it.
Yes.
Is that right?
Ed Tatman. We had 5 crew chiefs at one time within the Tulsa, about 100 miles of Tulsa area, that actually flew in the squadron with this helicopter. And Ed is one of the ones that came with us today from Tulsa. He lives in Stigler, Oklahoma, and he flew in this unit in 1967-68.
The crew chiefs, by the way, the crew chiefs were our parachute. I mean, of all the soldiers of every kind of training imaginable that I ever served with, the helicopter crew chief was the finest trained, most capable, most competent soldier I ever served with. Just that simple.
And I'll pass it over to Ed for a minute. Any comments right now, Ed, about serving and that particular aircraft?
Are we ready here?
Yeah.
Did your engineers, producers want us out here?
Yeah, that's fine. You're good.
I appreciate the comments, and I would say, and kind of going back and to honor our general, to me, every time you climbed in that cockpit, you've got to understand what these pilots went through. I cannot, in my wildest imagination, imagine sitting up there holding that stick in a hover, and in some cases we would have this wheel on a rock, and it might be 2,000 or 3,000 feet off the side right here, and knowing at any time that could end, and to sit there and hold those sticks while we're trying to do our job and everything, just beyond imagination to me. So no disrespect to the one mission, I think you should have got one every time you got behind the stick. And but anyway, I've been flying with this aircraft since 99. We've been going 23 years. We lost our leader in 15 and things slowed down tremendously. Just took the wind out of our sails, and he was the driving force that was behind us and so on. He was a non-military man. He was totally civilian, and so he bought this thing for a parts vehicle to support another 34 for lift. And so he pushed it to the back of the hangar for 12, 14 years. It was stacked full of pieces. When they picked it up in 1985, this young man, Jesse, step out here just a little bit. This is the son of Mike. He is our second generation pilot, and when we're gone, he's going to carry on. I'm not going to tell you his age, but in 1985, he was 10 years old. They went to Tucson, Arizona to pick this aircraft up, and whoever was in charge of the yard there says, boys, help me clean this up. Load everything you can in it. And I think you loaded about 18 or 20 of these blades, and they had to walk them back into the tail pylon to get them in there. And then they had to kind of glove them like this, and then stuff foam rubber they could find, and things on top of them to protect them and so on. And of course, they're the most valuable thing. They don't reproduce those, and they do time out. And when they time out, they go in the scrap pile or go on a static display somewhere. And Jesse rode down in the old truck, and their air conditioner was what we affectionately referred to when I was a kid as a 265. That's 2 wing windows turned in and 65 mile an hour and about 105 degree heat. And but they got down there and trucked that thing full of parts and brought it home. It went in the hangar for 10, 12, 15 years. The lift business did not materialize. Another business was lucrative enough to keep them going, and it was just kind of forgotten until a guy called and wanted to purchase some parts out of it. And Gerald, our leader, got in that thing and went to digging around, and he found a cardboard box in there with the logbooks and stuff in it for this aircraft. And him being a civilian type individual, he went to leafing through it and found entries that said battle damage at station such and battle damage at station such, and so he called Mike. Mike, being a military man, he told him this, and Mike says, Gerald, I think you've got a warbird up there. So they got the logbook down and got to doing a little more dissecting and decided they did. Went to putting it back together. The mission changed. Went to putting it back together. What you see here is just almost 100% original. The interior of this aircraft has never been touched except for probably a power wash. I think when it came out of the desert, it had probably an inch of sand in it and dirt and debris, and the outside has been rubbed and scrubbed. When we get back out to our location, we've got a picture that's got the bullet holes targeted, and kind of give you some idea. And if you look through the cargo door, you can look right at 3 or 4 of them right in there. There's one of them for a 6-foot tall man. It is straight in the door, right behind one of the seats. And when we get back out there, I'll try to drop the back of that canvas seat a little bit where you can see that damage. It sticks out pretty clearly there. And of course, when you go to the other side and look at that picture, why, you'll know what it is. This has been a tremendous ride. We take it as a learning tool to schools. We can do things them guys, excuse me, General. We can do things these guys with them wings that stick out like that can't do. We can put it in a schoolyard. This aircraft's been in over 200 schoolyards and probably as many veterans events and on and on and on in the 23 years we've been going, since 1999. It's a healing tool. We get around behind it every once in a while, have a little prayer meeting back there. It's an educational tool, it's a healing tool, and it's also a flying memorial to 33 of our squadron mates that paid the ultimate sacrifice right here. And so obviously we feel like that thing demands the first respect for sure. And I had a young man walk by yesterday. I'm getting too old to fight fair. And he was pushing the bassinet and had a couple families with him. And they kind of rolled up, and he said, if you've seen one old airplane, you've seen them all. And I stood and thought about that and visited with Jesse. I'm getting to where I think these things out a little better than I did at one time. And part of me just almost went and invited him to come over and read this, give it a minute, and get away from the aircraft. It's not just another old airplane. And all these airplanes, or most of them out here, the warbirds especially, have got tails to tail. Let's let Jesse, if we can we do that, gentlemen?
We were gonna do a walk around and talk a little pilot stuff. We're running out of time. So I'm going to save that until like after the questions, and we're going to open it up to questions because I'm sure people have got questions about the aircraft. But I just want to end the formal portion here with this is the last part of your book, General Brady, and I found it very interesting. And this is something. If you're in trouble now. I'm going to try to get even. No, I'm not going to get even. But he makes a poignant comment here, and I'll read it. It says, whatever happens to our bodies as we age, our minds are not devoid of romance and we still dream. In my dreams, I am again a captain, not a general. Hurrying into the mist of the moist morning fog, or inky blackness, climbing into the cabin, surrounded by the sweet smell of JP4, strapping in to the detent, the trigger, the sweet smell of JP4, the whining engine, the bumpy roar, and off across tracer-marked terrain. Voices in my ear begging for wounded comrades. Hurry, dust off. Then the signal, the terrain, the enemy, the highway. Down on the collective, forward on the cyclic. Kick it out of trim. Hard over to the ground, dodging trees, dipping into paddies, snaking forward swiftly. Stop. Hard left pedal, right cyclic. A fast, flat turn, no float, down to the ground. Confusion, we got them. Clear on the right, the left. Oops. The sharp crack of gunfire snapping through our bird. Crew okay, no red lights. Up, steady, right pedal rotating into translational. Speed, then altitude, then more speed. Full bore ahead into the caring hands of a physician and life. And that was in the tail end of his book, and you can see what this man is really concerned about. And this isn't the general, this is the captain, and he still dreams that. Thank you, General Brady.
Thank you.
All right, we got about 8 minutes right now, not a lot of time, but I'm going to open it up to questions, and then afterwards, like I said, General Brady is going to be signing books back in the that building right there, and I highly recommend the book. I will also say thank you to American Airlines. American Airlines helped you out in getting here, from what I understand. They used to be my former employer for about 33 years also. So I appreciate the ride they gave you and their support. And with that, we'll open it up to quick questions. Go ahead, up the top there.
So General, first I'd like to say thanks for the presentation you gave today. It was very interesting. From a pilot's perspective, I was curious because you hear a lot of stories about heavily damaged Hueys getting their crews back and surviving, these dust-off missions. Is there something special about the Huey that gave it that sort of robustness and ability to take hits and stay in the air?
Well, it did not have armor. You can't do that much to a helicopter, but we did have what's that? Kevlar. We had a Kevlar thing here on our side that you could slide out after you got into it, and we all carried a pistol. And guess where we put that pistol? That was it. And some of them would put something in the bubble down there. So you didn't have a lot of protection, but the bird did take a lot of punishment. And you could fill the rotor blades with bullets. The most beautiful advance from the old helicopters. Some of the hardest training we had in the early days was to get into a burning ship and get the wounded out. Somebody created a fuel cell. That sucker didn't burn. Of all the crash sites, and we were just talking about this, of all the crash sites I went into Vietnam, I can't remember off the top of my head any of them that caught on fire. So that bird would go to the ground and crash, but it didn't burn. And the saying in the early days of my flying was, if you don't get killed in the crash, you'll burn to death. But the Huey had a beautiful cell, even with the tracer. It would take a lot of rounds and still keep on flying. And the only thing that would stop it really from getting to the ground is if you killed the pilot and the co-pilot. Then there was an issue. But the bird, no matter how many rounds it took, unless it hit something really vital, the transmission was the most dangerous thing, because if that blade stopped, then you're dead. But as long as the blade's moving and you got controls and nobody's hurt, you can get that thing to the ground on a dime. We used to, in training, we'd turn the engine off and shoot auto rotations, try to see who could hit a spot closer than the other guy. And now they won't do that. They'll shoot auto rotations to about 50 feet and then recover, which, I mean, you're not going to crash at 50 feet. What the hell good does that do you? But no, I can't tell you how much I love this bird and how many lives that it saved. And we were just instruments. But it was this wonderful machine was so quick and so powerful that saved lives and could take so much battle damage and still survive. That I can't tell you how many friends I have who have crashed this thing I don't know how many times and are still walking around.
Another question right here.
General, dust-off 39 out of Pleiku, 1968.
Oh.
That's not a dust-off bird. Would you explain?
Well, it's got guns on it. So we
People
never
need to know that.
Huh?
People need to know that.
Well, they talk a lot about the Geneva Accords and everything. We were armed, but we had a rifle, and I got all my guys pistols too. The crew chief and the gunner, or the crew chief and the medic, had a rifle and a pistol because they had to leave the bird, go into the jungle, and drag the patients out, and they could not be unarmed while they're doing that. And you can't carry an M16 and a person at the same time. So we were armed to protect ourselves and to protect our patients. And so that's why we were armed. Now, there were some dust-off medevac units who actually mounted weapons, which is really stupid because you have to get one more person on there on each side to man the damn thing. You can't hit shit with it. I don't care who you are. You can't hit anything with it, and you don't know where the fire is coming from. So why? And the worst thing is the noise. When I would tell them, don't shoot, no mad minute. I don't want to hear anything when I come in. Don't shoot. The first time I went in, everybody's shooting like crazy, and the guys in the back are shooting like crazy, and the damn hot rounds are going down the back of my flight suit, and I think I'm dead. So no shooting, quiet, nice quiet approach. Then, if you hear somebody shooting, you know it's the bad guy, and you could do whatever you have to do to get the hell out of there. So there's conflicting thoughts. One of my pilots talked about gunships and shooting and all that, and I finally said, what good does it do? And he says, well, it makes me feel better. And I thought, what the hell have I got here? But so it's not, the guns, as I said, the medevacs from the first cav, not the first cav, but the 101st, or the first cav, I think they mounted machine guns on the side of their aircraft, which were just stupid. Really. Took up space, more weight, less room for patients, and you can't hit anything. You know, we in the early days, we were trying to teach our pilots how to shoot if they had to out of a helicopter. Guess what? you shoot behind the target. Now, how long does it take to teach a guy to shoot behind the target? It's difficult. We had an area where we had a bunch of peacocks, and we had lanes going down through there, and these guys would practice on the peacock. Believe me, those peacocks were perfectly safe.
Okay, we've got that perspective down. Thank you. All right, another question up here.
You mentioned that the crew was a medic and the 2 pilots and the crew chief, and then there was also a gunner, correct? No?
Not on my bird.
No?
There was a gunner. Your crew members, the crew chief and the medic were your protect. If you got into an area and you're on the ground and you start receiving fire and you see where it's coming from, they were armed and they could return the fire. But I discouraged that. And because, you know, just to hit a guy in the jungle, it's just wasting ammo. It's very difficult. And the most important thing was to get in there and out as fast as you could. No, we did not. I would never carry a gunner. Although, as I said, the medevac helicopters in the first cab did have gunners. Total waste.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? Okay, we got one over here.
How long could the Hueys stay up in the air?
We counted, for my purposes, we counted for about 2 hours. Is that about right? And then at the end of 2 hours, the 20-minute warning light would come on. And the one thing you knew when that light came on, you didn't have 20 minutes. So that was the limit. And so we had, beautiful thing about it was my second tour, my first tour, we actually refueled in 55-gallon drums with a chamois cloth out in the middle of the paddies. Second tour, we refueled hot, and we could refuel. So we could go 15 hours without getting out of the seat, without any problem at all, because they had fuel for us everywhere. And hospitals, too, and that was the most important thing. That's why our missions were so quick, you know, 33 minutes from the time the guy's shot until he's in an operating room. You're just not going to die.
Mike, I got a quick question. You talked about armament. We got the M60s here. How about armament on the Sikorsky? What was standard?
Same thing.
Okay.
2 M60s. Yeah, one on this side and one on the other side.
Okay. All right. Another question. Anybody anywhere over here? We got. Oh, got a youngster.
That guy looks like he's going to be a helicopter pilot. Looks like a smart guy to me.
Go ahead.
How fast do the helicopters need to go to get off the ground?
Well, I think it redlined at 130 knots. We flew at about 120.
But to get off the ground.
Oh, to get off the
red
ground,
line, yeah.
well, you have to hit. You know, the trick is when you got a load. The trick is hitting translational. And the way I used to do it with a heavy load was, and some of them would have to splash their way through a rice paddy just to get enough airspeed. These were, a lot of the time it was the gunships, which were overloaded, and some of the slicks too, just to hit translational so you get up in the air. But I found that if I dipped it to the right with right pedal, it took demand off the engine, gave me more power, and I could get translational sideways and then turn into the flight. And so taking off, you're just like the speed of walking. But then the first thing you want to do is get speed, and then you want to get altitude. You got that, young man? Go to helicopter school.
Yeah, I was going to say, put him in school. He's ready. All right, go ahead, Karen.
What I'd like to know, the Huey is the sexy bird out there, but the H-34 is the workhorse. I'd like to know what a typical mission was for that airplane and the type of things they had to do to accomplish those.
And that's for the Sikorsky,
Yeah.
you're asking. Typical mission for the Sikorsky. Okay. Who wants to?
That'd be Ed. He did the missions.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, Ed. Or Jesse.
I'd say Ed is the one that can explain this, but they pretty much used it for anything that they could put in it or put into the field.
Since I've been here this week, I've told the story probably half a dozen times. I'd kind of gotten rusty at telling the stories. We actually hauled a singing group, and I think they were the Ronettes. Beautiful 3 girls, girls of color. They were gorgeous. They had beehive hairdos. They smelled pretty. I was in love. And we took them into a zone with Huey gunships escort. We flew into a mountain outpost. The girls got out. We went back up and spun around for about 30 minutes and went back in and got them and brought them back somewhere and let them out. We didn't just hop them around. So I don't know if one of them had a brother on that outpost or something. I feel like there might have been something special going on here. But it was, the aircraft, if you can only imagine, was used for everything conceivable in the world. And it was actually used for medevacs. It had no markings on it. We wasn't trying to hide from anybody or identify or anything. We might take a recon mission in and then automatically become a medevac.
How about a typical time for the mission? How long do you think that thing? How to compare to a Huey? A couple-hour mission? Is that probably about right?
I don't think I could compare because I wasn't associated with Hueys. We just all worked all day long, sun up to sundown, 24 hours. I believe the general said a while ago. It was 24/7. The air wing saved my life. The neat thing about it that I never occurred to me when I joined was the air wing. We did get to go home in most occasions back to a secure base, and have a hot meal and a clean, dry bed. Medevac might come at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so we had to go to the old club and drag the officers out of it and slap them around a little bit, and help them in the cockpit. The young guys.
Got it. Yeah, I understand.
The young guys.
Yeah, not us old guys. Yep.
And but I wish we had the time to tell you about the ceremonial buffalo. We do not have time to tell that story, and it may not be appropriate. But anyway, you just name whatever you could use a helicopter or a pickup truck for, or a Jeep or whatever, a pack mule.
So Jesse, how much fuel does that hold?
It holds just shy of 300 gallons.
Okay.
It's got a 2-hour range, just like the Huey does. We have a 30-minute fuel light, but it feels like 3 minutes. So we see the light come on, we land. So
I understand.
And it's doing about, it's burning 65 to 70 economical, trying to just get it here and home and stuff like that. But in a hover, it's with a load, it's burning 110 to 115 an hour.
Okay, and you brought this thing from Oklahoma, right?
Oklahoma. We're in the Tulsa area.
And how fast cruise speed wise?
We were coming up here. We got lucky with the wind gods. We had a tailwind, so we were doing about 100 knots over the ground. We were indicating about 75 to 80, and it took us about just shy of 6 hours to get here.
Okay.
And lots of gallons of gas.
Okay.
So.
I got to ask General Brady, what's the fastest you had a Huey?
Fastest I've had it going?
Yeah.
We had, one of my guys was Hook, and you can read about him in the book. The aircraft was hit with a mortar, and by the time I got to him, he had a lot of head wounds, and I was really, really worried. And so I bent that damn thing over, and it was right at the red line, which is what, 130,
123 is a published one, but I'm sure it'll go faster than that.
Well, and the ones we had, I think there was a red line there, and the aircraft started to shudder a little. My co-pilot brought me back to my senses, and so I eased back. The beautiful thing about it was that there was one neurosurgeon in the country, and he was in our hospital that day. And so we got Hook into the hospital probably within 20 minutes. Like I say, you can read about the mission in my book. It was really a miraculous thing. And that surgeon opened up his head, and to the day, he was a big, tall farm boy from Iowa, a great medic, and but he lived. And we played golf. He wasn't worth the shit on the golf course, but he had 2 daughters. This Iowa farm guy. Now listen to this, and he's also in the Aviation Hall of Fame. One daughter is a PhD from Duke, and the other has a master's degree from the University of Iowa. So I don't know if he got out of the 8th grade or not, but he was a medic supreme. But anyhow, I got him on the bird, and I was really worried, and so I bent that damn thing over a lot more than I should have, and we might have had some mast bumping, and so, but anyhow, we got him to the hospital. But I think 130 knots is about the fastest I ever went in that thing. But when you're on the trees and you're going 120 knots, that's fun. But if one of those trees hits you, it feels like a sledgehammer. Really, even if it's a little small limb or something, if it just hits you, it's like a damn sledgehammer.
All right. Any other questions out there? We got one right up front here, sounds like.
I heard rumors, I was reading somewhere that there's one rescue copter went in to save some people, and that there was no way to land, and they actually used the rotor blades to chop their way into the jungle to make a pickup. Is there any credence to that?
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that before, but if the guy did that, he was really stupid, because that blade will chop down some. And we, as I said, we had a bunch of very inexperienced young pilots, and we went through rotor blades like crazy. We were hitting trees all the time. But you don't chop your way into an area unless you're really dumb.
Okay, with that, I'm going to wrap it up, but I've just been given the high sign that there's somebody else back behind you who wants to say something. So I guess I better pass it on to Connie Bolin here for a second. I suspect she's got a microphone, so Connie, you got it.
Thank you. I'll say thank you to all these gentlemen, and it's a pretty amazing event here at Oshkosh where we can have all these aircraft. So thank you to all you guys. Thank you for General Brady for being here. And as soon as we get the noise down here just a little bit, I'd like to take just a moment. Ed may have already mentioned our thanks to American Airlines, but it is a very special thing that they do for the veterans. So General Brady is here today courtesy of American Airlines. They provided the transportation for him. They also have the honor flight in progress to D.C. tonight. They will be returning here to Oshkosh after their day in Washington, D.C. They have an airplane that they have dedicated to the Medal of Honor recipients. So I just wanted to give a shout out to American Airlines and say thank you very much for your support of our veterans. So that's back to you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Connie. And I'll just say,
Thank you, guys.
you look up the definition of hero in, well, I'd say the dictionary, but now I guess I got to say the internet. And the first word is courage. The second is significant achievements. And the third is nobility. And we've got that man in our presence today. So thank you, General Brady.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. God bless you. You bet. Pleasure being
Thanks,
with
Dave.
you guys.
Appreciate it. Good job. Mike, appreciate it.